Good afternoon. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. Today, as part of the Miami University Alumni Association's webinar series, we present Industry Innovation with Generative AI. Joining us for today's webinar is Michael Connor of Amazon Web Services, where he's head of Global Consumer Goods Industry Group, and Professor Emeritus Dr. Jim Kuiper. Welcome to you both. Thank you for being here. Just a reminder that live viewers can submit a question during the webinar by clicking the Ask a Question button under your video. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael to tell us a little bit about how generative AI impacts industry innovation and what that looks like now and moving forward, and sort of all the complexities that go with it. So welcome to you, Michael. Happy to have you, and you too, Dr. Kuiper. Let's turn it on over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Molly. I'm really excited about today. Like Molly said, I'm Michael Connor, class of 1994, Miami. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. And so I work for Amazon Web Services now. I'm in Atlanta right now. And so I spent 10 years at Coca-Cola. I led a data science innovation team. I built a lot of the digital marketing technology stack. So the last 6 months have been really amazing. Generative AI is pretty much all anyone wants to talk about. So I meet with a lot of customers, and I've met with 1,000 C-suite and board members over the last 6 months. And so it's been really interesting to see how everyone's approaching it, talking about ethics, how they organize internally, how do they do innovation, and all these types of things. So I wanted to share just some of the experiences, some of the things I'm seeing out there. And so here's just kind of a rough agenda. And Dr. Kuiper and I, want to have some discussion too, but want to cover all the news that's happening. Things change every single day, and get out of slides. I want to show you some really cool use cases in terms of generating images. Of course, there's videos out there too. Give you a sense for how all of this stuff works. It seems like magic, but it's really actually pretty simple under the covers. And then also talk a little bit about how I see companies organizing for innovation, kind of like the people culture balance that a lot of people are dealing with. And Dr. Kuiper and Molly and I have been talking a lot about responsible use. So ethics, what does this mean for employment, fair use, legal implications of all this stuff. So that's basic run of show. And Dr. Kuiper, I'd love to kind of hear from you and have you tee it up a little bit, and how you're thinking about this.
Yeah, Michael, I think you're perfectly positioned to help us see how generative AI is being used in industry, particularly so not only are you at Amazon, but you're talking to people around the world in various industries. So that's great. Before we dive in, let me ask you a question. You're a 94 grad of the systems analysis department, which is now the one that I have retired from, computer science and software engineering. What's the most important thing that you learned from your experience at Miami? It's been helpful in your career.
Yeah, I think the thing that, like, looking back, that was most valuable for me was that there was a lot in terms of computer science and data science and things that we learned, like just core curriculum, but there was a big focus on how do you actually take this and apply it to solve a business problem. And I think that that's the thing that's most interesting to me. When I led a data science group in Coca-Cola, I saw that there was this culture clash between the technology teams and the business, and the people that really did a great job and added a lot of value were people that understood the business problem. They were good communicators. They worked backwards from customers. And I saw a lot of people that were squarely focused on the tech and kind of more enamored with it, and failed to solve business problems. So I thought Miami did a great job of setting me up for that and really thinking about the business problems. So that helped a lot.
And do you have any quick advice for students?
Advice for students? Gosh, I could spend a few hours on all the things. I think, Miami's a great school. I would focus on the people aspect. Things that I've kind of had to do some self-development with is around emotional intelligence. Not something I focused on. I was always obsessed with software and computers, but emotional intelligence and communications and teams and things like that, especially with some of the generative AI we're going to talk about today. That's really important. I think all the group work, some of the communications classes I took, but I think that's more important than ever, especially with all the tech coming out. So people are a big part of the equation.
That's great advice, and I think our students need to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Because Miami is strong in that, and sometimes the students don't understand why that's important. So thank you
Yeah.
for that. Well, let's dive into the subject. 2 months ago, we had a talk, an interview with Dr. John Fimiani, who does research in the area and kind of dove into some of the technical stuff. Let's go back to your outline and let you talk some about how it works in industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I want to share. When I talk to customers, the big things that I really get are responsible use, the legal implications. How do we use this for business? What does it mean? How will we organize? How do we innovate? Do we think that this is a fad or is it significant? And so I just really want to share everything I've learned from talking to those 1,000 executives over the last 6 months, and hopefully it'll help you if you're in business, or just also think about this. I love talking about like the cultural implications and the human aspects and the ethical part too. So we'll fold that in, and of course love questions. So I want to share, just start with kind of like just things I see in the news. Like this stuff, it changes every day, and so it's kind of fun to talk about some of this stuff. It's amazing to think about like how long it took for people to jump on Facebook or some of these other platforms, Instagram, that rose pretty quickly. ChatGPT took something which a lot of companies like Amazon and Google, Microsoft were using, and all of a sudden they democratized it, which I thought was really smart. But they got to 10 million users in the first day. And so I've never seen a technology that was adopted and democratized so quickly. And a lot of people ask me, this is probably the next Bitcoins or NFTs or metaverse? You hear all these tech terms and people get excited, and there's like a ton of venture capital and it goes nowhere. And so a lot of people say, is this really real? And I'm seeing people build this into real use cases into production every single day. Goldman Sachs and McKinsey did some really interesting research on it. Goldman estimated a $7 trillion impact to the economy. It's 7% of global GDP. McKinsey had similar numbers. And so I've never seen C-suite and board members be so interested in a technology before. And it's because everyone senses this huge disruption and they're seeing things like this. So there's a lot of great technology, I think, also for people and to help people. So UCSF created a brain implant that decodes thoughts and turns it into synthesized speech for paralyzed patients. I thought that was really great. One of my passion projects is something called Chat EQ, and we basically use artificial intelligence to help people develop their own emotional intelligence and deal with conflict. So I'm obsessed with how can we actually help humanity. Of course, a lot of my customers are sometimes can be more focused on their business and business operations, but I think there's a lot of areas where it can help. So. My company, Amazon, we just invested a $4 billion in Anthropic, which is a company that makes large language models. And we'll get into kind of how some of that stuff works. But Facebook is always doing things that kind of are borderline fascinating and sometimes a bit cringy. But they just announced a few weeks ago these Facebook personalities. So Kendall Jenner has one called Billy, and her tagline is she's a no BS ride or die companion. And so you can actually go online 24 hours a day and kind of interact with this persona. And I think that they spent time with her and kind of to get how she communicates and her style and things. Of course, they did one for Snoop Dogg and 23 other celebrities. Snoop Dogg is a dungeon master. That's kind of his thing. So we'll see how that shakes out, but it's super interesting. Biden just signed some AI regulations. It was executive order. And I haven't dug into it a lot. There's some interesting things around disclosure. So for example, if you're creating AI images, they should be watermarked, and how do we communicate at least what's going on in the background? So this 10X is super interesting. Matt Wood is a VP of AI at Amazon. And so he released a paper a couple of weeks ago talking about how we're seeing a 10X productivity improvement with developers, data scientists, and things like that. And it's interesting because a lot of the companies I talk to, they see things like that, and they're pushing back on their IT team saying, hey, we keep hearing about this 10x improvement. Why aren't we cutting costs by 10x? And so there's a bit of a disparity between, you know, what's possible and what we're seeing boots on the ground. And of course, there's always that people element, right? So it's hard to get people to change how they're doing things to embrace a new technology. That's going to take a little while. And there's just natural resistance. We talk about FOMO is the fear of missing out. We've been talking about FOBO, the fear of becoming obsolete. So I think that there's some things that are happening psychologically with people where they're resistant to kind of embracing the technology. And so it's kind of slowing things down a bit. I love some of like the imagery, and the video is coming together very quickly. There was a Sony photo contest a couple months ago where the top prize went to something that was AI generated. And so I think the person did it as a publicity stunt to prove a point. Of course, once they let everyone know it was AI generated, they were pulled from the contest. But it was fascinating to me that a very prestigious competition had an AI image won it. So video and AI and images and text are all kind of coming together in interesting ways. So I want to show some of this in the demos we'll show in a minute. So I won't talk too much about that, but I think it's going to change advertising fundamentally going forward. And then Twilio did something really interesting. Like a lot of people are talking about responsible use and ethics and governance in companies and organizations. And what they did is they created these nutrition labels. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but basically think of the nutrition label you see on the back of your cereal boxes and things like that. Internally, when someone at Twilio creates a model and they release it into production, they create this nutritional label around AI. So where did the model come from? How was the data trained? Was there diversity in the data and things like that? And so that's kind of just a way that they simplify a very complex concept. So a lot going on. There was a Drake Weekend song that was released to YouTube a couple months ago, totally AI generated. It sounded like them. It's actually a really good track. Of course, it wasn't them. Drake weighed in and said he thought the track was really good, but it had 5 million views within just the first few hours. So it's been interesting to see all of a sudden people are able to create new works of art in the style of artists, musicians, and of course that has huge implications for licensing and, you know, is that fair use and things like that. So,
you know, that new Beatles song,
yeah,
I guess had some AI as part of, I guess, originated with John, but
yeah.
hey, could you say a little more about, you said, was it Chat EQ?
Yes, the chateq.com. I'm getting ready to release a new version, but what I found training a team of engineers, I had 60 engineers at a company I work for, and not very high emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence simply is kind of your ability to understand how someone else is feeling and kind of what need gives rise to that feeling. And not only in other people, but in yourself, right? And so that to me is the foundation for really good communications and really good group dynamics. So engineering teams are infamous for not having that. And so I was working to try to train people, and I did a lot of self-research, and it's really hard to teach that. And so I'm working with Dr. Matthew Lederman is my partner in this. And so we're building this app that uses AI. So you tell it, hey, I've got conflict with my boss or with a friend or a family member. And it kind of breaks down what the other person may be feeling so you can empathize with them. And it gives you coaching on how to approach the conversation. And it's based on decades of research to help you optimize that conversation. And what we found is that when people get really good at having hard conversations, teams tend to operate better, families run better, people are healthier and happier. And so we've just found that people tend to avoid hard conversations. So,
you had mentioned that emotional intelligence was something that students need to develop.
Yeah.
Would your tool help them?
I think so, and it's going to get better. The next release will allow you to actually role play the conversation. So it's going to give you coaching on what to think about, what the other person may be experiencing, and then it role plays. I'll give you a good example. A friend of mine, he told me, he said, hey, I have to have a hard conversation. I've got to take away my mother-in-law's car. She keeps crashing it. And so, he ended up having that conversation with her, didn't go very well. And I think the reason is because he didn't understand that 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 car represented some dignity, autonomy for her, her independence, her ability to socialize. And there's a lot of things he didn't think through when he went into that conversation. So it didn't go very well. And so this is what the app does. It kind of helps you think through, hey, there's more to it than just the safety aspects. There's independence. And if you go into that conversation thinking about that, like, hey, this is like about her dignity, it's gonna be very sensitive for her, then it kind of helps you prepare. So yeah, I'd love for people to use it, give me feedback, and then yeah, hopefully in a couple of weeks I'll get the new version out.
So that was chateq.com.
Yes. Yeah, that's my nights and weekends project I've been working on for a couple of years, which is how I got into all this stuff. So I really think this tech is going to help people. Like in the last news section, we were talking about giving a voice to people that are paralyzed, kind of locked in. And so that's what I'm most excited about. Of course, it'll help with commerce and things like that, but there's plenty of conflict in the world. What we're seeing with Israel and Hamas, and of course, Ukraine and Russia, there's just a lot going on where I think these tools could help.
I just wonder if it could help people on the autism scale, because I understand one of their issues is understanding other people's responses and emotions. Just a thought that comes to mind.
I think you're right. And I was talking to a friend of mine whose son is autistic, and she was encouraging me to pair the app with imagery, like either emojis or images of people's faces to help autistic people kind of learn if they're feeling X, then their face kind of looks like this. Mm-hmm. And these are some cues. But I think that's a great call out. I hope it will, but I haven't really gotten into that just yet. But great suggestion.
And I wanted to go back to the Billy. So is that like the latest version of Eliza? Is that if you have a conversation with her, I mean, the Eliza thing, just kind of echoed back what you were saying, and it sounded like there was someone listening to you.
Right.
Idea what she does?
I don't know. I think it's supposed to kind of be her personality and give you the sense that you're kind of chatting with Kendall Jenner, which would be kind of a really special thing. So I haven't tried it yet. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like if you talk about like a retail store or you have a company, will they have a persona like a Billy persona that you talk to, right? So when you go shopping or you're talking to a brand you're working with, you call your phone provider, will they have a persona that has that brand voice, that kind of knows everything about your account? They can give you recommendations and suggestions. That's one way I see this playing out. The other way is it may be that you'll have your own personality that you create, and that's your agent, and you interact with that agent, and that agent would then go do scheduling for you, go shopping for you, check on things like review your finances. And so I think that there's going to be a large language model and a personality, a bot between you and a lot of things in the future. I'm just not really sure who will own it or how it will be released, right? But any thoughts on that?
No, what comes to mind is just where does this data come from? Because of course, large language models are the basis for this. And how about me personally? How do they? Is it just through conversations and this develops over time? Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's a great question. So what we found is that large language models are a lot like humans. That's how we designed them. So they're terrible at math and data analysis. And so what we found, the way to get around that is you actually give the large language model access to data. And so some people were worried when we started giving these models access to the internet and things. But so the cool thing is it basically ends up being very good at human discussions, understanding people, understanding questions, and then also maybe taking some data and explaining it. And I'll actually show a demo here in a minute on that. But what you're doing is you're giving it access to a back-end system, your database or your finances or the internet. And so it's going to go out and search those databases for you.
Yeah, that ability to understand the questions in a little more sophisticated way that I've experienced when I play with ChatGPT is fascinating.
Yeah,
because I know it's not easy to do.
Yep.
Understanding human language is a difficult problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And the crazy thing is these models know 38 languages. So we had all these cultural barriers and language barriers before, and so now like just real time natural language translation, and I think it's gonna be. I think about like my app, the Chat EQ, and could you give that to a police officer and have it basically give them real time feedback on how to de-escalate a situation, right? So I think a lot of this stuff is not really real time yet, but we're starting to see that tech pop up into call centers where it's doing real time analysis and recommending to the call center personnel, a course of action to like rectify an issue, or hey, take your time, slow down, maybe give them some empathy type thing, and it could coach them on that in real time. So it's just fascinating to think about where it could go.
Yeah.
You want to see some demos and just kind of show some cool stuff?
Oh yeah, we like cool stuff.
I do too. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to share some of this stuff. Is fun. I love starting with imagery because it's a visual. It's easy to understand. But this is an example of an advertisement we generated. So advertisements have typically been done by agencies. You have to go and do a photo shoot. This is a beach in Kauai, which is an island, small island off the coast of Hawaii. And so, of course, if we wanted to pay photographers to go to all these different beaches, you imagine the millions of dollars it would take. So this is generated using a model called Stable Diffusion. And it's and what we did is we basically gave the model the name of the beach we wanted to generate. And then it generates that. It takes about 20 to 30 seconds. And then these tools are cool. They allow us to overlay the images. So this is kind of like based around the Find Your Beach Corona campaign. And so the cool thing is we could give it a different beach name. And I think I got that right in there. No, I didn't get that. Okay, so you can give it a different beach name, and it'll generate the new version. So it's super fascinating. What we end up doing is taking using the text models and asking it for a list of all of the beaches in the world. And so imagine, and I can show you a really cool image of this, but being able to basically generate all of the different beaches that are in the world. And so the idea would be, like, let's say you're on Airbnb and you're looking for a place in Kauai.
Oh, yeah.
We're able to now show you this ad based on geolocation or based on context. And so what we found is that advertising is a game of decimals, and people respond. Like when they want to go to Kauai and they see an ad like this, it really draws their attention in, and we see that the ads end up being a lot more effective. So I actually think, I don't know if this is running right now. Okay. But yeah, so people, this is another like ethics. I had a meeting with a bunch of retailers in New York last week, and we were talking about this. This person doesn't exist. It's not a real person. Some of the AI stuff early on, the eyes were weird and the teeth were weird and the hands were weird, and we solved all those problems. But here we actually just gave it this is called the prompt, where we tell it what we want, and we actually gave it the lipstick color that we want. And the amazing thing is this is a 4K image, so it's super, super high resolution. I don't know how you could distinguish this from an actual person. I just wanted to zoom in and kind of show you all. I think you could probably see the pores and the slight wrinkling under the eyes, and every little eyebrow hair and every eyelash, the cornea. I think it would take an expert to really figure out whether this is a real person or not. So I see a lot of people now looking at this for photo shoots. I've had a few brands tell me that this was creepy, and they were worried about customer backlash, and we were talking about the ethics of this. So I don't know. I'd love to get your take, Dr. Kuiper, and but this is definitely controversial.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I was kind of scanning an article today about the question of the implications toward political campaigns, and making it appear that someone is saying something they really aren't, or doing something they really never have, and the danger of that. This particular article was kind of saying, well, that has been possible and really hasn't happened to this point, so they were hopeful, but who knows? Yeah.
Well, did you see the images of Trump? There was like someone released these images of Trump and getting arrested in New York. And I mean, it looked really, really real, and it wasn't. They weren't real images. So I think it has been possible for a while, but now it's almost anyone can do it, and it's really easy, which is concerning. And that's why I think Biden, and people are looking at legislation. A lot of countries are passing legislation, but I personally would like to see where there's some kind of a watermark required on all AI generated images. That way we just know, hey, this is AI generated, and and it's not. So yeah, I think elections really concern me. Something I think we have to be thoughtful about.
Yes.
So yeah, I love that one. So this is another kind of version of the ads, and this is cool. So what I did was, let me see if I can find the prompt. I did Atlanta Piedmont Park, this is by my house, right? So again, we're generating an ad. This is for a dog food. So if you want to generate personalized ads, you have to think about, okay, what about dog breeds, age of dog, the location, the setting. Here we're publishing this in Spanish. There's a different QR code. So if you take all those things, it's like a combinatorial problem, right? Where if we really wanted to generate this, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of images. So here I printed out a list of the different dogs. But so I have a list of all the cities, all the different dog breeds. You can see this is in the fall. This is in a park by my house, is the Atlanta skyline. And so you can just see how powerful it is to be able to generate advertisements like this. And so I think I had a problem with the, let me see if I can actually show it to you running. Yeah, so this is really interesting. You can see it kind of starting to generate. We just typed in German Shepherd. And so what it does is it's generating kind of a low resolution version of this. It starts with just noise, and then it looks for patterns that look like the prompt. And then once we did that, we sent it to a refiner, which added actually more detail. And then we sent it to something called an upscaler, which made it like a 4K type image. So this dog isn't real. It never existed before. And the way we trained this model is basically every image off the internet that it could draw from was used to train these models. And so it's seen an awful lot of stuff. So yeah, very, very controversial, but I love the puppy one.
So you could have changed to Central Park, and
yeah,
would have been the same thing there.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't see people doing this manually. What I imagine is you're going to have a spreadsheet with or a small program with a list of the dog breeds, right? The product that you want to sell, the parks, right? And in all of the stuff, within a few hours, you're going to generate thousands of images, right? So when I was at Coca-Cola, we always talked about people in terms of a segment or an audience, right? A marketing demographic, like a male 18 to 24. We always wanted to talk to people. Like every marketer's dream is to talk to someone like them. And that's where this is going. Your ability to communicate with someone or to market them in a very individualized way is finally here. It's really, really exciting. Sometimes unnerving.
Do you remember the movie Minority Report?
Yeah, it's totally, yeah.
Walking down the hallway, the ads along the side would be to him, specific to him.
Yeah, and that's here, or very, very close to it. So I had a few customers talk about research and development, and for like my customers, I work with a lot of consumer packaged goods and retail people that sell products, but they were saying it takes 6 quarters to get a product out. So you have to come up with it. You do sketches, you do designs, you do renderings. It takes a long time. And so here's an example where we just generated this shoe based on a prompt. And so the idea is you could generate hundreds of these shoes, and we could run them by consumers. And we're now also able to generate the 3D CAD model. So from a prompt, we could give it a shoe prompt like this, and it could generate the 3D model as well. And so like a lot of the CAD modeling and product design work, I think, is going to change too. So I think R&D is in a super exciting space. This is, again, I'm intentionally hitting on controversial issues because I think the discussion is interesting. This is generating inclusive ethnicities for photo shoots. I've actually seen retailers say that because most fashion models are size 2 and 4, they get a lot of returns on plus sizes like the 12, 14, 16. And it's because the people can't see what that product will look like on their body type. Of course, one of my customers, they do 1 million images a year. And so now, and that's just with the size 4s, right? So now imagine multiply that by 10 to do it for every size. So they're going to really take 10 million images a year. It's really cost prohibitive. So we started talking about doing things like generating different body sizes, types, ethnicities, and things like that to create more of an inclusive type merchandising look. So yeah, of course, controversial, right? I wanted to share one more. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Well, actually, what comes to mind right away is the issue that in Hollywood they've had about in their current contract. I don't know how they handle it, but they had to address the AI generated things for the actors didn't want to be replaced by AI, and so I'm wondering if you get any. I suppose the model industry is not as unionized, perhaps. I wonder. You could get to the point where you don't need models, is what I'm trying to say. Live people, because
that's right. Yeah. So where most of my customers, I think, are saying that they want to land is a lot of people are worried about liability. So imagine that we create an image and the photo looks just like a real person, and then there's some legal issue. So what I see people doing is you could actually train a model called a LoRa, and what it does is you give it a bunch of images. Like I've given the AI 30 images of me, and I can then create images of me anywhere in the world. So what I think people will do is they will contract with models and they will license their likeness, and then they will train the AI, and then they could use that model on thousands of images, right? So I think there's a lot of implications for employment here. And I want to talk about that, in a little bit. But I think again, the fear of becoming obsolete and the social implications of this. Mark Andreessen, he has the Andreessen Horowitz hedge fund or VC fund, which is one of the most successful in the world. And he said, look, with every tech innovation, like personal computers and the internet and all these things, it's never led to mass layoffs. And so we have the lowest unemployment rate basically in history. And so I think it's a fair question. Like, this technology is more powerful and it's coming faster than some of the previous technologies, right? Electricity took a long time to roll out, right?
True, yes.
Personal computers took a long time to roll out. This is rolling out in like weeks and days. I mean, it's happening so fast, right? So I think every company, every organization should start to think through social implications and how does this change the way we work and interact. And so I know it's hitting education, right? Like I see people working on papers and things like that. And I had a professor, not from Miami, but reach out yesterday and say, I've got more papers to grade than I can deal with. How can I use this tech to help me grade? So I don't know. Just it's the Jurassic Park question, right? It's not a matter of whether we got so caught up asking whether we could. We still have to ask the question whether we should, right? So that's why I love showing some of these things that generate some of these questions. So
where is this with respect to Amazon in terms of putting it in actual use?
So Amazon we're building generative AI into every area of our business. And so there's already things out there that you may be using. So for example, on Amazon reviews, if we've got thousands of reviews of an item, and I've got some slides on this, but if we've got like thousands of reviews of an item, we will roll those reviews up and tell you, we'll tell you basically what people thought, right? So instead of you reading through 1,000 reviews, there's an example down here on the right where we could say, like, look, this is what people your height thought about this dress, right? And we could say generally people thought it was super high quality, but they didn't know if the price was, worth it, that type of thing, right? So already we have stuff like Shop the Look, where you upload an image, and then we will show you products that are similar. We also, when you upload stuff onto our platform, we generate product descriptions now for you using AI, and I'll show you a demo of that. And then we're doing things like just walk out. If you're not familiar, you walk into the store and the cameras will track you through the store and look what you put in your cart, and it charges you on the way out. And so I think even Thursday Night Football, we stream on Prime Video, and we've got overlays that show like percentages of odds of blitzing and likelihood of passing. And, so it's the mandate is that we are building it into everything. And there's Gen AI leaders for every group. And so this is, there's already stuff into production that you're already probably using.
I have to confess, when I see the like AWS,
Yeah.
I've almost distinguished them from Amazon. I
Yeah.
know it's an Amazon Web Service, but I think of it as a different product. But yeah, it is Amazon. So.
Yeah, we're very, very separate. We're two very different groups. Of course, we work together, on some things, and we support them from a tech perspective. But yeah, I love that you kind of see them as different brands. That's intentional. So, I wanted to share a couple. I think that was it on the imagery stuff. Oh, I just want to share one more thing. This was a virtual try-on concept where the image on the left was the input, and the image on the right was the output, right? And so the interesting thing is we changed the outfit, we changed the purse, the jeans. The model also gave her a blowout, which is fascinating. But what I wanted to show you is there's a lot of people in academia, Miami included, where they may work on a paper, like for example, this thing called REMBG, where someone, a PhD, wrote a paper on how to automatically remove the background of a subject using AI. Someone else wrote another paper where they said, what if we use AI so you could tell it face and hair, and the model will create a selection mask in the image based on what we say. Like most people are in Photoshop with a lasso tool. So each one of these things is a different paper that someone spent a lot of their life working on and coding and testing. And so another one is the depth map processor. So someone wrote this one where it'll take an image and it creates a 3D rendering of it, right? Where we can tell depth of the image. So it takes a 2D image and it basically extracts depth. So what I'm doing is I'm actually using each of these as a separate component to do this virtual try-on demo. And the cool thing is what we're seeing now is your ability to stitch together AI and in different brilliant works from people all over the world in very short order. There's no coding here. We're snapping these things together, right? You can add new tools, right? And drop these in here. And so your ability to assemble works from different people to do something powerful is really exciting, I think.
So is that a tool that Amazon makes available to others, or?
So this is kind of a work in progress. There's some different commercial versions out there. It's an elusive thing, right? This is a very hard to solve problem.
Right.
So yeah, this tool is not available. This is something my group is just kind of working on in R&D and trying to get right. So
it's very cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. So I wanted to share some the tech stuff. I love the image stuff, but the tech stuff I think is almost more interesting. And this is, if you're familiar with like ChatGPT, this is more similar to that. But show you some really cool things. These demos, basically, this one's around call centers. But if you think about, if you've ever called a call center, our ability to take that call and to transcribe it into text, and this is a call that I have here, we can do that right now with AI. But then really cool, these new capabilities, we can ask these questions like, what could the agent have done better?
Oh.
Of course, the demo gods are not being nice to me right now. Here we go. Yeah. So this was typically like, some person had to go and review a 30-minute call to give them coaching on what they could have done better. Right. And so this comes back, and you could say, you could do the same thing in French. Like, what could the agent have done better? Answer in Mandarin. Right. So, 38 languages are available to you.
Wow.
I love this too. Like a lot of times you have a 40-minute call. You want to know, okay, what was the summary of the call? Like, tell me what happened. So it can quickly break down what happened. I love this. Of course, chat EQ, and we're, talking about emotions. What was the customer feeling at the end of the call?
Oh.
And so the ability for this thing to detect nuanced emotions, feelings, and stuff like that is super powerful. I like this one too. Check for action items. So if the agent committed to do something, you could create something in the database to say, hey, within 2 days, they need to do, we need to follow up and make sure this is closed out. This is something a customer asked me for last week. Based on the call, what's the likelihood of litigation? Right. So this is not the kind of thing I imagine someone's going to type this in after each call, but what will happen is when the call ends, we will automate all of this. So the AI will get all of these questions and it will get attached to the call in the database, right? So we see this
could be very useful in committee meetings, I'm thinking, or
Yeah.
what went on there, and even the kind of sentiment analysis.
What were the action items? What were the points of resolution? Give us a call. Give us a summary. Especially if somebody missed the call, they could come in and they could find out what happened, right? So there's a bunch of interesting ones. Product descriptions. This is a favorite one. One of my customers has had 100 million product descriptions in their database. They're an online retailer in Latin America, and they were a mess. Translation problems, all these kinds of things. So a lot of my customers have products like this where they've got what we call product facets. It says the zipper and the manufacturer and stuff like that. They don't have good product descriptions, which are important for like search engine optimization. And so you can tell the model like, hey, take this image. It'll look at the image too, and the facets, and generate a 50-word product description. The cool thing about what we just did here is we also gave it a Nielsen Prism demographic. So we said, hey, we've got people that are striving singles. There's 68 demographics in the United States. We know where they live. We know what they typically drive, where they get coffee, where they shop, how old they are, what they listen to. So what we're doing is we're generating a product description specifically for that demographic, right? And then of course you could ask the same thing of like keywords, right? So super powerful. So one of my customers was able to clean up 300,000 product descriptions in their product information system without any coding, right? Wow. So this is kind of a fun one. I put this together yesterday, but this will look familiar to a lot of people that write Python notebooks and they do a bunch of analysis on like maybe pricing. What should our prices be? And it's really hard to understand this analysis. So, to ask the model, can you explain the data? Which fields most affected the sales of this product? And it comes back and it kind of explains everything. I love this. Can you explain the data as though I'm a 10-year-old?
Oh, really?
Yeah, let me see. Come on, demo gods. Okay, I'll explain this in simple terms. And it really breaks it down in a much more accessible way. So pair that also with, asking your database a question. So you got all this data, but we know models are bad at data. Mm-hmm. So you ask it a question, give me the names and email addresses of all customers, and it's generating the SQL for us.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've written a lot of SQL. It's kind of gnarly. Yeah. And your ability to now ask a question of your database. So the number one thing I got before all the Gen AI stuff came out is how do we become a data-driven organization? So everyone's got all this data, but they don't really have insights to kind of help them take better actions. And that's true of almost any organization I've talked to. And so I think that this is going to really change that. Right. So I got like one or two more examples I wanted to show. This blew my mind. Somebody's calling and I want to know why they're calling. So I gave the model access to the database and we could see that this person like submitted an order. It was delivered. The customer did a return and then someone received the return and then they're calling and we want to know why is this person calling? I think the demo gods have finally caught up to me. So I broke this one, but what it does is amazing. It actually figures out that the person is calling because the credit was not issued. And so it actually does chain of thought to look through this and see that most credits are issued within 2 days and the customer didn't get a credit. And so with that, we can actually route the call, or we can say, hey, we realized we didn't give you a credit. If that's why you're calling, press 1, and we'll send you a text message when it's resolved. So that's super, super powerful. Trying to think. I love this one too, manufacturing, where like a lot of my customers have manufacturing or they have complex like financial data. But one of my customers was going through when a machine broke down, they went back to the corporate office to get the manuals. And so basically you can give the AI access to all the manuals. And then you can say something like, hey, the bottle filler on line 6 is foaming. Can you help me troubleshoot that? Right. And so what the model does is it goes and it reads through the manual and then it comes back and it troubleshoots with you. And you could do it in multiple languages. Right. And so if maybe they're not English speaking, maybe the manual was written in English, but they speak Portuguese. Right. So super powerful. Code conversion is cool for like people that are more computer science based. but we got a bunch of COBOL. I actually wrote COBOL in the VT100 terminals in the lab
Really?
in Krieger. But yeah, this is cool. Like I had when I was at Coca-Cola, we had a mainframe, and it was costing us a ton of money. The woman who was responsible for like some of the key components, her name was Ginger. She was 70. She'd retired, and so to be able to say, "Tell me what this code does," and actually have it go through and tell us what it does, and then hey, how about converting it to Python for us? Is also super powerful. You can convert to Python or JavaScript. So I think the interesting thing about all this stuff is that it's one technology. All the stuff I was showing you is basically one technology, and it's doing all of these different things. And so before we had things that would do a demand forecast or sentiment, and it was a different model, and it's the same technology is solving thousands and thousands of problems. So I like to show this slide because people ask about the significance of it. I really put it on par with the printing press, electricity, personal computers, the internet, and the cloud, and maybe mobile computing is another one of those breakthroughs. But I think that this is like a really unique time in human history. So that's why I get really excited about it. I think this one simple technology is really going to transform a lot. So do you talk about it that way, Dr. Jim?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I think it's potentially that significant. It's interesting that, when I was back in grad school 40 years ago, there were people doing research in AI back then, but it's just amazing how the generative AI, well, machine learning was kind of the start of that, and then the generative AI that's come from that has been really dramatic in the effect it has. One of the issues you were showing that example of changing COBOL to Python, which very useful. First thought that comes to mind is, do we know that was an accurate translation of that? And which just reminds me that there are lots of examples people give of wrong answers that generative AI produces.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that? I'm thinking about, in some fields, getting a wrong answer isn't such a huge deal. In others, it's horrible. So,
yeah. So I look at it right now like a really smart, energetic, maybe new hire or intern, where it can do incredible things, but I want to maybe review some of the work to check it right before putting it into production. So when I actually migrated that COBOL system for Coca-Cola, what we did is we ported the code over, and then we ran both sets of code in parallel. The one was on the mainframe and the new set of code, and we looked to make sure every day that the output from both was consistent. And when it wasn't, we would go back and check things. So I don't think you want to just go and turn something over to a model and just let it go without some oversight. Most of my customers are talking about human in the loop type use cases. Like, for example, the product descriptions one, the model can generate product descriptions and you can have somebody sanity check it, but it's changing the job roles. So one of my customers, the retailer in New York, what they said is the people that used to write, they were copywriters that used to write product descriptions. They're now editors.
Yes.
So AI is writing the copy and they're doing the editing. So their job has changed.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's going to be a lot of job changes. And that's why like the change management culture piece is going to be really important. And I actually think that that's the number one blocker for people right now is like how comfortable are people with the technology. One of my customers said the best thing that they did was they really sat with everybody in the company and helped them understand it and use it. And they said once they understood it and what it was doing, they saw adoption grow. But when people see it as this scary thing that they don't understand, they're really resistant to it.
Well, I can see issues on both sides, being afraid of it, but on the other hand, just going full bore into it without the checks that you're talking about, and not knowing that you really need to, you still have to go through all the testing of it that you did, normal software, et cetera. It may not, or whatever the application is, that it occasionally produces some errors. It's not always right. So
that's right.
Do the checks. Don't just depend on it out of the box.
That's right. I think there's a couple questions in the chat, and this is like the last thing I'll show, but it ties into what you're saying. Every company should build a responsible use framework. Every organization.
Yes.
This is the Amazon one, and so I see a lot of people that I know take ours, and they use it as a starting point because we share it publicly. But basically, like looking at like your AI team diversity, identifying limitations of it, looking at how the data was collected. Are like licensing or legal issues there? For example, if the model was trained on code that was GNU licensed, then that's an issue, right? And so identifying bias, I had a problem with that early on in my career where I didn't train the model across different ethnicities. And had some problems with the system. So legal and compliance. So these are all the things, like once you get over that initial glow of models are incredible, they can do all these great things. This is the type of thing like safety, security, robustness. How do you really do this and make sure that you're not creating like a risk to your brand or your company, your employees, or things like that, right? This responsible use is really important framework to have in place.
You mentioned the diversity things there. Talk a little more about that, because in some communities there's been kind of I think an overreaction about DEI kind of efforts, and why is diversity important in generative AI or machine learning?
Yeah, I think that the team that you have, well, a couple things. One, the teams, right? So making sure diversity in terms of backgrounds, diversity in terms of skill sets, to make sure that like if you have a full tech team and they're not thinking about like the PR implications or the legal implications. So you really need a diverse team in terms of skill sets. And then diversity in terms of the training and risk for bias. So I'll give you a good example. I saw there was a case where somebody was filtering through resumes is hard. I've done it. I had a job opening. I have 500 resumes. That's hard. So what they did is they looked at all the resumes they had in the past, and they looked at who they hired as a result in an effort to create a model that would streamline that. And you can see the risk of what I just said. Like if in the past they had age bias or ethnicity bias or gender bias, they've now just taken that human bias and they've encoded it into an AI to now automate that bias. And so that's where like the Twilio labels come into play, making sure that every team understands what that bias is and the risk of the bias. And I built like a governance board when I was at Coke. So when an application goes into production, the people had to atone for those things. They had to have thoughtful answers for those. And a lot of times they just didn't realize the questions that they should be thinking through. And so when a company creates that framework to say, look, you need diversity of data, like you need to think through like bias and harm, and then without that, then you don't let them go into production, right? There's a little bit of a governance step.
So you're talking about diversity both on the team itself and then that team being aware of the data they're using, because these things are all so data driven that you're getting diversity in the data that's appropriate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you have to think through all of those things. And I think there was a brand that had a PR issue a few months ago, and they lost $23 billion. They sent some product to an influencer, and there was backlash, and they lost $23 billion in market cap. And so working for Coca-Cola, their brands know the value of the brands, and they really want to protect those things. And so that's why people are being a little bit more careful in doing the human in the loop use cases first to make sure they're thinking this through before they just unleash it on the world. I'm actually seeing small companies are moving a lot faster because they have less to lose, right?
Yes.
So they're innovating much faster. But the biggest thing I think companies have to think through in organizations is how do you organize? How do you build teams? How do you approach this and do it at scale? And I think I see a lot of people struggling with that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Molly, you're kind of monitoring the messages. Are there any that we haven't answered we should address?
So I have a couple, and this might be circling back a little bit closer to the beginning of your presentation, Michael.
Sure.
But Samantha asks, well, she says she works in higher education with experiential learning, and the ChatEQ app sounds really amazing to her.
Cool.
She says, what training data sources do you use for that? She
asks. Yeah. So when I started learning emotional intelligence, I got obsessed with a movement. I think it started in the 70s. It was called compassionate communication, or another term was nonviolent communication. It was led by a gentleman named Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. And I mean, he just did incredible things. They created schools where they taught people how to communicate in a different way. He did negotiations between warring countries and all kinds of social justice type stuff. But there was a whole body of work that came out of that. And so essentially what we did was we took nonviolent communication and all the training and learnings and all the videos that we could compile. And the idea was to pair that with a large language model. So it's coaching you to have a conversation based on all this research and all this decades of work that these other great people did. Right. So that was the basis of it. So it's basically a way to save you from doing what I did, which is reading like 50 books and watching 100 videos, going down the rabbit hole for 3 years. I'm like, no one will do that. So how do we put that research, which is brilliant, and put it in someone's fingertips?
Absolutely. And the sort of, you mentioned the 70s, I think that the historical context and the long period by which you're sort of using data from, that really makes sense to me. Man, this is fascinating stuff. And you've really broken it down to make it sort of digestible for even sort of the not so tech savvy, a little bit skeptical people like me. This has been really cool. Megan asks, what do you see as some of the most important checks and balances for generative AI? I'm sure there's something that sort of sticks out to you as like, maybe we need to nail this down before we get too much farther down the road.
Yeah, I think that responsible use framework or something like it. I can paste a link, I think, into the chat. People want to go look at that, but I think most organizations will need to have something like that has those checks and balances. If you're looking at it from like an organizational standpoint, I'll give you an example. Like I was talking to an executive earlier today, and they were doing a meeting, and someone just pulled up a random website that did transcription, and they had it listening to the meeting. And the person I was talking to was the chief security officer, and he just about lost his mind. He's like, we're having a very sensitive IP conversation, and you basically are allowing some third party who we have no idea who they are, how the model was built, how they're like, we're basically giving them proprietary data. And so like education has to be a big part of that, right? Like who are we giving this data to? What are they going to do with that data? Will they train that their model on the data we're giving it? And if we're giving it IP or sensitive information, then we're basically just lost IP. So that responsible use framework, I think every organization has to think through and then figure out how to activate it, right? How do you train people, educate people to make sure that they're not doing what that person did, which is just like, open up a live stream to some random website.
Absolutely. Excellent.
There's a question that someone gave us earlier that's a little more philosophical, and I don't know if we have enough time to get into this, but let's just try. The question was, these machine learning models are created from existing data. Do you think they'll ever be able to generate original thought? Which is
I don't know. It's been humbling for me to realize as a human, I'm not quite as original as I thought, because I'm seeing the models come up with brilliant poetry, songs. Like it's really incredible. It's kind of humbling. It, leads us to kind of ask what it means to be human. So I would say like the images that I'm seeing, like just everything. It's really incredible. Play with it if you haven't. Go to Amazon and play with it, or go to Google or to Chat GPT. But it looks like original thought to me. And for the most part, I think that 2% of all people have original thought. The rest of us are just kind of compiling, things, and we're kind of mixing and matching. Which is probably what I do. So it seems like original thought to me, or close to it.
Yeah. Now your points, that's my same take on it. What does it mean for me to have original thought? It's built on all the data that has come into my brain. Also, how original am I being?
I am so glad to hear you two sort of have that same feeling, because I too ask myself the same, how how original can I be at this point? You know, like, how are we even writing original songs now? You know, or original works of, you know, text. It's just, we're constantly building all the time. And you know, at this point in history, it seems hard to sort of pull strands of originality out of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Michael, this has been a treat. I mean, this has been brain food for me for sure, and
Yeah.
a brilliant illustration of what generative AI can do, how it can help. I mean, I have 1,000 other questions that, you know, we don't have time for in this entire day, I don't think. But we may come back at you, buddy, as
Please.
time moves on, to have you answer some more questions in a digestible, understandable, layman kind of way for us.
Yeah.
We appreciate this. I think I speak for a lot of our viewing audience today.
Well, thank you. It was a huge honor to be invited. So I really appreciate it. It's good to spend the time with you.
Oh, well, we are grateful. Dr. Kuiper, thank you for leading this conversation. I think you have done a fantastic job asking all the right questions that the rest of us have a burning desire to know too. So thank you to this dream team here. We are so appreciative. As a reminder, a recording of this webinar will be available on our website in just a little bit today. You can see this and our other webinar presentations at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Thank you all for joining us, and love and honor to you all. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.